Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a official Ram Duck early impression on an old school, long lost, vintage, hard to find fragrance that I couldn't even find. Actually, I was going to buy a bottle just to show you how much I love this fragrance before I even put this review up because I knew it was going to be hard to find. And I went to look. There were 0 bottles on eBay, 0 on Mercari. And so it's gonna be a unicorn's unicorn. Even some of the people in the community that I know are into the discontinued vintage gems have said stuff like, I've never actually seen one of those in person, you know, that kind of thing. So the fragrance is from the house of Lancetti, and Lancetti released this little gem in 1982, and it's called Lancetti Uomo. So this little decant was sent to me by Duncan. Thank you, Duncan, by the way. He sent this to me 6 months ago, and I threw it in with my samples and just left it. I wish I would have smelled it then, because I probably would have had a better chance at securing a bottle. But basically, the House of Lancetti is one that does not get very much attention or love. I will tell you, there is a fragrance that I bought off of Anuj. It was a little tester that he had from 1991. It's called Il de Lancetti, and Schiaparelli is the distributor, you can see down at the bottom. So this is the only one from the house that I have, and I like it. I don't love it though, okay? So this Lancetti Uomo from 82 puts this version, or not this version, but this fragrance from 91 to shame, in my opinion, because this is the kind of stuff that I like. You guys know that I am a vintage lover at heart. Go watch my interview with Russian Adam yesterday. If you didn't, at the end of the video, he started to show off some of his recent purchases, and they're all vintage fragrances. And so when you're a lover of perfume, it's very hard to get excited about new stuff. You know, if you look at some of the new reviews that are out there on new perfumes that come out, many of the people who are honest, you hear a lot of the common threads going through newer fragrances: dull, boring. Even the expensive stuff, you know, even stuff like the new Frederick Malle Uncut Gem, dull, boring, not exciting, you know, offensive sometimes because of the woody, ambery syntheticness of the dry downs. And we didn't have to go, you didn't have to pay $450 for a niche fragrance, because decades and decades ago, we had this. We had stuff like this. And it's just, oh, God. Okay, so let me see if I can do this somewhat justice. Now, remember, this is an early impression. It's not a first impression because I have been wearing it today. It's 3:35 in the afternoon. I applied it at 8 o'clock in the morning. I've given it a couple sprays, one to one hand, one to another, so I've experienced the opening and how it transitions a couple times, but I am by no means an expert on this perfume. But I like bringing these fragrances to the FragCon because, you know, I don't like to play the same rat race that I feel like everyone else plays. A lot of the reviewers, they're just in a rush to get the newest fragrance review out. You know, as soon as they get the bottle, they drop a review the same day. And it's always the same thing: how amazing it is, the projection, what's the longevity, what's the compliments. I don't care about any of that. And I want to talk about stuff like this that no one else is talking about, because as a fragrance lover, this gets me much more excited than the new Louis Vuitton, you know, the new Stefan Humbert Lucas or whatever it is. That stuff doesn't interest me. This does. Lancetti Uomo from 82, stuff like this interests me. You know what's amazing is I could go through, you know, review after review after review. I could test a new release from 21 or 2022 day in and day out for months and just be completely underwhelmed time and time and time again. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I pick up a fragrance from 40 years ago and I just apply it, and it's an instant. You know, it just connects with me. It connects with my soul. It connects with everything that I feel a fragrance should be. Oh, it's a shame what we've lost in the fragrance world, you know, and that's why you have to go forward in the fragrance world. You have to go backwards, unfortunately. And if you don't understand the history that came before, you'll never understand what is being put out now. Even though they didn't have all these IFF synthetics, captive molecules, you know, all of these you know, notes and accords and all this stuff that the oil houses have now. Even though they didn't have all that stuff back then, the quality of the ingredients, the time spent on the fragrances, it's just, you know, a blind person could see it. You don't have to have sight to see it. All you have to have is a nose, and you have to trust your own nose. So let's talk about this fragrance. So what is it? So the House of Lancetti apparently has been around for over 50 years. I am not very familiar with, I don't care about the designer side of these houses usually, you know. So I think they're actually closer to 60 years now they've been around, if I'm not mistaken. There's a thing on their website that says 2012, a journey through 50 years in fashion. So I'm guessing that was a decade ago. Now they've been around 60 years, but I really don't know. But I do know that this fragrance, I don't know who the perfumer was, but I know that it starts off, instantly you can tell from the very get-go, it's the best Lancetti frag I've ever smelled, and it instantly shot up to the top of my wish list of perfumes. I have two on the top of my wish list that I can't find. One is this, and another is Metallice or Metallica by Guerlain. That is a very hard fragrance to find, but those two are at the very top of my wish list. And Rich Mitch did a fragrance about Guerlain's Cuir de Russie today. I would love Cuir de Russie in that Guerlain did, but it's such a unicorn. I'm not paying for it 4 digits for it. I'm just not going to do it. Russian Adam in our interview yesterday talked about a long-lost Guerlain too. That was a suede fragrance from the 1920s that Jacques Guerlain made. Stuff like that. Those ultra unicorns I'd love to have, but this might be a little bit more doable. You know, if I could find a bottle for $100, I would totally go for it, of Lancetti Uomo. But, you know, some of those real rare unicorns you're talking 1,000 plus. But basically, Lancetti Uomo is characterized as a spicy, woody fragrance, and it starts off very green. There's many green facets to it. There's Artemisia, definite Artemisia note, and Galbanum. Those are the two, but the Galbanum plays a back fiddle, I feel like, to the Artemisia. Think of the way that the Artemisia is used in something like maybe Dior Jules, something like this, which I believe this came out just a year or two before Lancetti Uomo, so you can definitely see there's some inspiration taken from something like Jules, just to give you an example, you know, something in the ballpark, if you will. And there's also a beautiful lavender, and that opening of lavender and green touches Artemisia. They also list, outside of just the Artemisia, they also list a note of absinthe. So this warm, woody, absinthe, you know, maybe a slight hint of anise, Artemisia, lavender, and a touch of mint, okay? And it is a picture-perfect 80s start to me. Complete picture-perfect. You know, Russian Adam said yesterday in our interview that he was trying to frame this collection. He kept using the words, I'm trying to frame it. I'm trying to give a perfect frame to, you know, what this History of Attar collection is supposed to be. To me, this right here, taking his words, I can't say it any better. Lancetti Uomo is a perfect frame, just a picture frame perfection of the 1980s. It is so perfect. And the reason it's so perfect is it has that greenness and has that hardcore, dry, animalic spiciness when you first encounter the fragrance. There's a lot of thyme. There is clary sage, which gives this dry, you know, I know dry and moist are opposites, obviously, but it gives this dry moistness to the perfume, and Spicy. Very spicy when you start, but extremely pleasant to my nose. And the reason it's pleasant is you're immediately getting this, this hint of animalics that kind of begins to come through. So if you've smelled some of the 80s fragrances, like, you know, if you've ever smelled this, Calvin by Calvin Klein, if you've ever smelled Jules, if you've ever smelled Leonard Pour Homme, this right here, and if you've ever smelled Aramis, okay, imagine you kind of took those four, Calvin, Aramis, Leonard Pour Homme, and Jules, and combine them, and you get Lancetti Uomo. And the reason you get Lancetti Uomo when you combine those is if you take the herbal, spicy aspects of Aramis, if you take the leathery dry down of Leonard Pour Homme, because there is leather in the dry down in Lancetti Uomo, and if you take the animalic, I did a video on a fragrance by Lanvin called Monsieur Lanvin. It came out in the 1960s, and it had a beautiful animalic dry down. That's also on the top of my to-buy list, by the way. If you guys are interested in kind of what I'm watching, it would be Lanvin, Monsieur Lanvin. It would be Lancetti Uomo, and it would be Metallica, Metalis by Guerlain. Those are my big three right now. Would I love to have a bottle of stuff like Ciel de Gum and stuff like that, or Gum, I guess you're supposed to say? Yes, I would, but that's even pushed back, you know, especially since I have a bigger decant of that. This would be very close to the top because this just hits the mark for the kind of fragrances that I like. Oh, and in the mid, there's only two notes listed in the mid: tree moss and jasmine. And the spiciness and the mossiness in Aramis reminds me a lot of the way that it's used in Lancetti Uomo. Something about the way that the moss is used feels very similar between the two fragrances. I don't know why. I have no clue why. I mean, you could take the oak moss in something like Calvin because there's a ton of it in here. You could take the oak moss in something like Jules. There's a ton of it in here. You could take the oak moss in something like Leonard Pour Homme. There's a ton of it in here. But the one that it really resonates the most with is Aramis. Aramis has this, you know, green herbal opening with spiciness and moss. And the moss adds this layer to the perfume. You know, the moss adds this thick, rich, you know, it takes that green that I'm talking about and it makes it texturized. Have you ever seen someone like spray Knockdown on one of these like just walls inside of one of those, you know, custom, not even custom, but mass-produced homes that they build nowadays? They just come along with this like sprayer and they just spray this this wall. They call it Knockdown, and the Knockdown just kind of is the cheapest way to do it, but it still looks good. It's texturized or whatever. It adds a texture to the wall. That's what oak moss does to the fragrance. That's what real oak moss does to vintage perfume. It adds this grandness to it. It brings it to life. It makes it realistic, and it's really lovely because in about an hour, the greenness of the opening really begins to subside, okay? So the greenness of the opening begins to subside. So the Artemisia, the Galbanum, and there's even a bit of mint. And you know, there's a fragrance from way back when. I did a review on my channel, and I think it was sent to me by Anuj, if I'm not mistaken. Anuj at Enchanté sent me a sample because he had a bottle and I was thinking about buying it, but he had the wrong bottle. He had the one from the 90s. I wanted the one from the 80s with the offset sprayer. And it was called Burberry's for Men. Burberry's for Men from 1981, 1 year before Lancetti Uomo. And it had this opening that was kind of green but minty. And Lancetti Uomo has the same thing. There's this spritefulness, there's this zestiness about it, you know, even though it's thick and rich and heavy and textured and animalic, and I'm getting to the animalic dry down in just a minute. But there's this energy to the fragrance when you first spray. And I absolutely love the opening. 10 out of 10 opening, 10, perfect. I don't rate fragrances, but this is a 10 opening for me. And then once that greenness subsides, right, and you get away from the Burberry's for Men feel, right, it starts to kind of move in its own direction. I have seen some people compare it to this. I don't find the comparison as apropos, other than the fact that there's some green touches with a little bit of leather. There is this hay-like tobacco vibe in here that's missing in Lancetti Uomo. But I almost feel like I like Lancetti Uomo even a little bit more than the original Davidoff from '84. Davidoff came out in '84. A couple years later, Lancetti Uomo came out in '82. And there is this, what ends up happening once the greenness subsides is this Italian herb vibe begins to come to the forefront. And I don't know about you, but Lancetti sounds pretty damn Italian to me. And so there is this beautiful, Italian herb feel. Grandmother's Spice Kitchen Italian herbs, which I've talked about many times before in fragrances like Trussardi Uomo, Fendi Uomo, two of my favorite Italian leather fragrances of all time. They both have this this Italian grandmother's spice kitchen feel in the very opening. Here, the greenness either finds a way to offset some of that, spices, so while they're there, your nose just doesn't notice it, or it just takes an hour to an hour and a half for the spices to really join the party. And they're probably there from the beginning, if I had to guess. They're probably there from the beginning, and they're just overshadowed by that green Artemisia. It's a very strong note, Artemisia. And, they're just a little bit overshadowed, I think. But once that greenness subsides, you can really feel, you can feel the, you can feel the spices come to the forefront. It feels like they're just joining the party, but they've been there all along. And, once the spices subside, you also notice the oak moss much heavier. So the oak moss, that textured oak moss, comes further and further to the forefront from underneath, right? And it adds that weight to it. And, this perfect 80s oak moss for me joins the party. And once that 80s oak moss joins the party, if you've smelled some of these old fragrances that have big doses of oak moss, like some of the ones I mentioned, you could also mention something like, if you've smelled something like Yataghan, right? Big oak moss dose. Yataghan feels like you're smelling, that tinctured forest floor vibe with a lot of moss growing on the forest floor. And it's almost like you're smelling a fragrance material. The oak moss in Lancetti Uomo, it's almost like you're smelling a fragrance material that is infinitely larger or heavier or denser than any little couple drops of oak moss that are in the fragrance, if that makes sense. It adds this almost like another dimension to the fragrance, almost like you've stepped into another dimension, like you're looking at a tesseract in 2D and the oak moss makes it in 4D or something like that, right? Like the brain is having a hard time comprehending there's another dimension that you're smelling this in, but you can't see it, but you can smell it. If that makes any sense whatsoever, do tell me. Made sense in my brain. But it is clearly, when you smell this, when you smell Lancetti Uomo, you will realize that this oak moss is one of the notes, along with the animalics, which we'll get to. The oak moss is one of the main notes that is drastically missing in modern perfumery. Not just sorely missing, not just drastically missing, but it's clear as day that it's missing. It is it is obviously missing, you could say. It's obviously missing from modern perfumery. Whenever I smell vintage versus modern, that oak moss vibe, they've never found a way to replace it. I don't care what they say. They say, oh, we found these molecules that replicate oak moss. They don't. They might to a point, but they, in their greed, I will say this about these oil houses, in their greed, and setting up this IFRA scam where IFRA bans everything, and then they all of a sudden come to the rescue from behind with, oh, well, you've banned oak moss. Well, guess what? We just happen to have a special oak moss additive that you have to buy directly from us to keep you safe, right? This scam that they have going on, or it feels that way. You know, I don't have any inside information, but it just seems very, it seems dirty. You know, it seems very dirty. That and then you have these insiders who are actually working at IFRA, and you know, in their greed, I feel like they've kind of meant to shoot themselves in the foot, right? And they actually accidentally shot themselves in the head, because through their greed, they've ruined what perfume used to be. You know, they've taken the soul out of perfume. It's soulless. It's missing that extra dimension that's so clearly here. It's so clearly here, and they've neutered themselves. They've turned themselves into eunuchs. You know, they have completely butchered what was such a beautiful thing. They took something that was an art form, and they're trying to turn it into a profit center. To me, is what it feels like. And they've really screwed themselves, I think. I think they need to do away with this ridiculous oak moss ban. And, you know, get back to just allowing perfumers to use the molecules that they want to use, and just put a warning on there if you're so worried about it. I mean, you'll allow someone to buy a pack of cigarettes with a picture of someone's lungs completely black on there, but you won't let them buy a bottle of perfume with oak moss in it because it might give someone a rash. Get out of here. And you know what really makes Lancetti Uomo so perfect for me as a perfume lover is once that oak moss begins to blend with this leather that seems to just arise out of nowhere. You know, the leather just arrives, and just, it's like love at first sight with the oak moss, you know, and they come together and they form this unbelievable duo of oak moss, leather, and, you know, if you've smelled it in Jules, like I said, you'll have an idea. But it is a absolutely beautiful dry down. There's real ambergris in the dry down. It smells like there's real ambergris to me. There's this pop, this pizzazz, this flash. There is this, and then to top it off with the leather, if you like the way that the animalics are used in something like Leonard Porum, right, with the leather, and they just list animalic notes. I don't know what animalic notes are listed in Lancetti Uomo. My guess is maybe it's a mixture of civet and castoreum, but I honestly don't know if there's anything else here. But it is very animalic, and maybe for someone who has never smelled anything except for modern designers, they may smell this and go, "What the hell is that?" And why in the world would you want to smell like that? For me, I smell this and go, "This is what a man should smell like." You know, like yesterday I was talking, when we were doing before Russian Adam joined the stream, I was just kind of joined the stream, and I was just kind of, you know, getting everyone ready for the stream and talking and stuff like that. And I was talking about something I've been thinking a lot about, and it's been just kind of this, you know, now that the cooler weather is coming, the seasons are changing, it feels like, you know, that everything has its time, everything has its place. Like I'm seeing these migratory animals like the geese come, you can see them in the morning flying in the V. I'm seeing a lot of monarch butterflies making the migration south into Mexico. And it's like, you know, they've had to time it perfectly, because if they're a little bit late, right, it's too cold, the flowers are dead, they don't have any place to kind of stop and you know, rest. Like I have a beautiful butterfly bush in front of the house, and there's like sometimes 10 monarch butterflies just sitting on there, enjoying the nectar from the flowers and refreshing before they go on with their journey. But if they're too early, it's too hot, they'll die, right? And so to have this innate nature inside of them that makes them leave at exactly the right time and migrate, you know, I was just thinking about how there's this surreal naturalism to it, that just everything seems like that there's a time in life for everything. And yet, you know, part of me wonders, like, when we smell something, even though you may not know what jasmine smells like, if you're smelling some synthetic crap they're giving you, you may inherently know that this is wrong. You know, this is not what jasmine should smell like. This is not what oak moss should smell like. You know, this is not what ambroxan, ambergris should smell like. That there's this, you know, there's something inside of us that tells us it's not right. You know what I mean? And to me, when I smell stuff like Lancetti Uomo, there's something about this that just feels right. Like, it feels like, yes, this is what a man should smell like. They should not smell like pralines. They should not smell like bubble gum. They should not smell like amber wood, fake dry down. They should smell like this. They should smell like animalic notes. They should smell like patchouli. You know, they should smell like these kind of notes. And it's just, every time I smell these old school fragrances like this, even if it's not my favorite, I never once say, oh, the quality was shite, or, you know, the person felt like they spent 10 minutes coming up with this idea. No, every single one of these old school fragrances feels well thought out. The ingredients were used like they actually used to care, is the thing. It felt like they actually used to care. And today, every time I smell something new, and it's always like $300 for a bottle, I'm always like, what is this? You know, like, why am I putting myself through this torture of trying to find one needle in a haystack where they release 1,000 perfumes a year, one of them is good, and, you know, when all I have to do is go back 30, 40 years and everything's great. Everything. If you like the civet in Coros, you know, if you like the civet in Monsieur Lanvin, I would highly urge you to try Lancetti Uomo. I don't know if you can find a bottle, because damn, I had no luck finding a bottle. But shit, this is good. I mean, very, very, very good. And as a vintage fragrance connoisseur, lover, whatever you want to call it, this must be on your radar. You have to sniff this. It is very good. That leathery dry down, shit, I want a bottle of this so bad. So I'll keep looking, but you know, I've heard some channels before where they say, well, I had this idea where I wanted to say something good about it, but then I wanted to wait till I got my bottle, then I was going to say something good. I don't want to do that. That's not fair. So I'm just kind of giving you my thoughts. It is an early impression, but I think I conveyed my thoughts. I feel good about what I've said on the video because it's damn true. It's coming from the heart. And if you are, you know, if you're in the industry or something and you happen to come across this and you're offended by this, sorry, it's the truth. I mean, that's how I think most frag heads feel. And I don't know if there's a way out of it other than just going the route of like doing what someone like Rogue initially did and said, screw you guys, I'm not involved in it, I'm not going to be involved in it. I'm just going to do my own thing. But those are very small houses, you know, and you don't get the big time perfumer training, blending, all that stuff. So there's give and take on both sides. But back in the day, you did. I mean, you got Pierre Bourdon making fragrances like this. You know, you had Jacques Polge making fragrances like this. I mean, they have no idea how good that they had it because they didn't know any better. It was just how it was back then. Obviously, there wasn't all this choice like there is now. There wasn't 1,000 releases per year. But, man, what a time. The 80s, my favorite decade, by far, hands down, no question asked. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you have any experience with this house, Lancetti, I would love to know your thoughts, especially if you smelled Lancetti Uomo. Even if you've only smelled some of the other Lancettis, I'd still like to know your thoughts, what you guys think about the house, the brand. They're kind of one of those bygone brands. Are they still even doing fragrances? I have no clue. I guess they are. I'm just looking here. Here's one from 2017. Argenta Blue Man. citrusy, fresh. Yeah, I mean, I guess they're still making stuff, but you never hear about them. I never hear anyone talk about the House of Lancetti ever. And so, you know, if you guys have experience with it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave it in the comments. I love seeing your faces in the comments. I love interacting with you guys. I try to respond to every single comment. If you have not got a chance to watch my Russian Adam live stream yesterday or any of the first two that we did, please go do that. I'm telling you, if you're a fragrance lover, it's some of the best content I've ever been so blessed to put on my channel. Thanks to him. I know yesterday he looked like he has been working very hard on getting these sample sets out. So I know he was probably exhausted from work, and he still took the time to join us. So thank you for doing that, Adam. I do really appreciate it if you get a chance to watch this video. But if you guys get a chance to watch the live, I would highly encourage you to go do that. So thanks, everybody. Hope to see you in the comments below. Thanks to everyone who subscribes and likes and all the good stuff that all the other, you know, YouTubers say. Thank you, Duncan, for sending me this sample. I never would have got to sniff this without you, mate. So you guys in the community are awesome. Appreciate it. Cheers, guys. Bye now.